Sadly, there are so many believers who choose titles and status and position in this world for self-glory's sake at the expense of doing what God wants. How many men and women have been called to the ministry or to the mission field just to be a faithful servant in a local church, but they've chosen a path of self-promotion and glorification instead in the pursuits of feeding their pride? I guess we could all think of someone right now. We know. Where they might say, Lord, yep, happy for you to use me, as long as it's inside my little world, because I'm not moving in. That, my friend, is someone that is not looking for the reward to come. They don't believe what God has to offer in the future is better than what they can see now. And often status and power is all that it takes for someone to forsake the Lord. And we see that was one of the temptations of Moses. But that was only the tip of the iceberg for him, because if we read in verses 25 and 26, we see two other things. It says, choosing rather to suffer affliction with the people of God than to enjoy the pleasures of sin for a season, esteeming the reproach of Christ greater riches than the treasures in Egypt. You know, we see two things here, and that is, he was willing to forsake the pleasures and the treasures. Two things that most believers struggle with in their life. Pleasures and treasures. Two of the most highly sought after things in this world. If you go into the world, you meet just about anyone, they are either consuming themselves with pleasures or the pursuit for treasures. And when it comes to the lusts, the desires of the flesh, the pleasures, Moses could have had every whim satisfied. From the sensual pleasures to the social pleasures of entertainment and parties, to the intellectual pleasures. Sin and the pleasure it can bring is there for the taking. And when it comes to the treasures, the riches, the fact that even still today, you know, thousands of years later, we wonder at the beauty of the Egyptians, gives testimony that this was a place full of treasures. We may think that we have treasures today, but if you want to go to a land of treasures, you go back to the days of Egypt when Moses was around. They had treasures. And there is no doubt that as Moses walked around the corridors of that palace, his eyes would have been tantalized by every beautiful thing a man could ever desire. And there's no doubt that his flesh, with its lust, both its sinful lusts and its natural desires, could have been indulged in without restraint. But Moses saw the treasures of Egypt, and he saw all the pleasures what they were there beckoning and on offer, and he said no thanks. Because God's reward is better. He had respect, he had his eyes firmly fixed on the recompense of the reward on payday. You know, if you went to the palace in Egypt and opened the big doors, you went into a room and you saw Moses indulging in some immoral practice in Egypt, in some drunken state while he was being entertained by near naked women, while he was clothed in his royal garb as a prince of Egypt, surrounded by his debauched friends. And you said to Moses, Moses, do you believe that God has something better to offer than all of this? And he looked up at you in this state and says, oh yes, I believe that. God has some great rewards, much better than any of this. Just as how you'd be thinking about Noah last night, you'd be thinking the same thing about Moses. You may say you believe that, Moses, but your actions don't prove it. But you know, sadly, there are countless Christians who will testify, sing with their mouths as they sing the songs. They will testify to you personally that what God has to offer and the riches in glory and the rewards that He's going to give us are far better than any pleasures, any treasures here on earth. Yet they secretly, or sometimes openly, indulge in sinful, filthy pleasures or pursuits that are an abomination to God. And they're just like Moses in that state, looking up and saying, oh yes, I do believe. We can say that we believe it, but cut out the words, look at your life, and that's how you know if you really do. As I said from that very first message, I tried to make it as clear as possible. Our faith will be seen through our actions. And without actions, the faith is not real. Now, I'm not talking about salvation here. I'm just talking about what you believe about what you read. Now, you apply to salvation also in various ways. But I'm just talking about what we believe as believers. But Moses was a man who lived by faith. He believed what God said. And that is, he believed that God's reward was better. That's living by faith. And brethren, the blessing that we have is that we have similar rewards promised to us by God as well. You know, we're told in Matthew 5:12, blessed are ye that when men shall revile you and persecute you, and shall say all manner of evil against you falsely for my sake, rejoice and be exceeding glad, for great is your reward in heaven, it says. In Mark 16 it says, for the Son of Man shall come in the glory of his Father with his angels, and then he shall reward every man according to his works. Those actions that we perform in our body. 1 Corinthians 3:8, now he that planteth and he that watereth are one, and every man shall receive his own reward according to his own labour, it says. 1 Corinthians 3:14, if any man's work abide, which he hath built thereupon, he shall receive a reward, we're promised. Colossians 3:22 and 23, whatsoever ye doing, do it heartily as unto the Lord, and not unto men, knowing this, that of the Lord ye shall receive a reward of the inheritance, for ye serve the Lord Christ. James 1:12, blessed is the man that endureth temptation, for when he is tried, he shall receive the crown of life, which the Lord has promised to them that love him. And there's plenty more. God has promised a reward to those who endure temptation and are faithful to him. But the question is, do you actually believe? And that's the question I've got to ask myself every day. Do I believe this? Do I believe that God's reward is better than any sin, any pleasures that this world has to offer? Well, to discover the answer, it's really easy. And that is, next time you're tempted to sin, look at the actions that follow. And that will tell you if you believe this. Look at the actions that follow. You know, when I was around about 12 years old, some of my friends were going to see a movie, heading off to see E.T. It was a big hit then. Scary, eh? And my parents didn't want me to go.